Hi, I'm Chris James, and you're watching A Healthy Alternative. Today, I decided to switch it up. We've got a special guest today. Nick has actually reached out to me. He's actually a YouTuber, and he has been researching fasting from a more technical point of view. He's actually studying at a university now, and I'm going to let him kind of introduce himself and talk about what it is that he does and what he's studying. But we thought it'd be a cool collaboration to talk about fasting from two different perspectives, and hopefully get your attention on some of the other aspects of fasting outside of just weight loss. Talking about, from a more cellular point of view, how fasting affects the body and things of that nature. So stay tuned. That's coming up next. We're missing a piece of the puzzle. You start getting healthy and you just become a better person. You need to start focusing more on the individual. Okay, Nick, so I want to let you go ahead and introduce yourself to the audience. Where are you from? What are you studying, and what do you do with your channel?
Yeah, sure. First off, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it. Secondly, I guess I'll run through the background. So I initially got my master's in exercise physiology, where I did some bench research, so kind of cellular and molecular research at East Carolina University, which is located in North Carolina. And then now I'm doing my PhD in molecular medicine. And I'm doing research in a concept that's actually relatively new, known as autophagy. So that's kind of the big craze over the last 10 years or so that's become really big. So that's what I'm actually doing my bench research. And what I mean by bench is when you think of like a laboratory scientist, you think of a person mixing chemicals together and doing all that stuff.
Right.
Essentially what I do in terms of my research, but my education is more in whole body and cellular physiology.
Awesome. I mean, that's perfect because you're the type of person that I always, when I was younger, I always kind of was like, man, that'd be cool to be that guy.
Yeah.
I was always interested in science. I loved science in general. When I got older, I decided that I was gonna move into more like mechanical engineering.
Ooh, that's another field. I just can't handle that.
Right. Well, it's interesting because when I got to college, I was just like, yeah, I don't think I want to do this anymore. So I left that behind. But both are very interesting to me, and I appreciate the people that do that work.
Yeah.
So what exactly drew you to this line of work? Like, why is this your field of interest?
So actually it was right before my master's degree. My undergrad is in psychology, actually, so it has very little to do with the kind of biology of everything.
Mm-hmm.
And after funny enough, I graduated with my psychology degree, and then I decided this isn't what I wanted to do. So I started to really delve into trying to understand how the body works. That's always fascinated me, from a cellular aspect, from a molecular aspect, all the way up to kind of understanding how the entire body works and how our different organ systems work. So I started going kind of how a lot of people do. They start going down the rabbit hole of the internet. And then I got really interested in exercise. So I thought, well, why not go for a master's in exercise physiology? So then I got into that and got into the research aspects. And that certainly fascinated me. But then I really wanted to take another step forward. I wanted to learn something outside of just exercise. I wanted to learn about really just not limit myself and really learn everything about the human body. So that's why I pursued now I'm pursuing my PhD specifically in molecular medicine, because it does allow me to have that flexibility, that openness to really understand the entire body.
Right. That's one of the things that I actually realized about specialties. When you go to school, there's all these specialties and you're put in these little boxes, and if you're going to learn about the brain, that's one specialty. If you're going to learn about the heart, that's another. And it's very restricting learning.
It is.
So the ability to study something where you can kind of broaden that and look at things more holistically, that's very interesting. um I think it's one of the biggest flaws with our education is how we box ourselves in, and you only learn this and that and the other.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think also, if you're talking to like a clinician, a person who has their MD as opposed to PhD, they're often, I mean, you only have a certain amount of time that you're in school,
Right.
and they have to focus on things like pharmaceuticals. They have to understand, how drugs interact and all that. And sometimes they lose on some of the education that you might get, like, and actually something that you've mentioned before on your channel is nutrition.
Mm.
They very rarely get any education on nutrition. I've spoken to some MDs here and at ECU, where I did my other education, and they've said, yeah, sometimes we literally only have a single class in nutrition. That's it, and not as in a class, as in a course, as in
Right.
1 hour
Wow.
of education, and that's it, which is a shame.
Yeah. Now, I'm curious, with everything that you've kind of learned and your career path now, is
Mhm.
nutrition a part of that?
Oh, absolutely. So I didn't even mention this earlier either. Because I got my undergrad in psychology, I had to essentially prove that I was good at the sciences before I could get accepted into a master's program. And to prove that, I decided to do about 1.5 years of nutrition science education. So that's how I got involved in nutrition as well.
Gotcha. Now I'm curious, do you see anything major that is wrong with how we teach nutrition today? Like, just based on your experiences so far, have you found anything that's like a red flag for how we teach nutrition?
Yeah, there are a number of different things, but I think for the most part, it comes down to people not being taught in kind of, I guess you could call it like a holistic understanding. Uh, we sometimes focus so much on particular aspects of our nutrition, but we don't necessarily, and we often ignore other aspects of our nutrition. And I think that I will say that for like a dietitian's program, they again are kind of, you would think that as a clinician you would want to understand as much as you possibly can, and they do learn a lot, no doubt about it, but because it's so much information that they have to absorb, you're again limited to those 4 years. And now there's actually, it's starting to change to the requirement where a person has to have a master's degree as well, so you have to have 5 or 6 years of education, and it's probably because they have to pack in so much information.
Mm.
But I mean, beyond that, just because you have a formal education in something, that does not mean that you get to just hang back afterwards. Oh, I graduated, I'm done. You need to continuously go after your nutrition education or your education in general.
That's a very, very good point. I think that we tend to feel like we've done our 4 years, 6 years, 8 years, etc. We've put in our dues. We got our paper. We can go get our job. And now you stop learning. And it's just like you never want to stop learning. And I think guys like yourself and even myself, I never want to stop learning. I've always been the type that wanted, like, we can always learn more. We can always refine a process, make it better, make it more intuitive or whatever. And so with my journey, what my goal is to present information that works for the masses, that works for everybody, which seems like it's crazy because how unique our bodies are and how differently we react to this and that. But I
Mm-hmm.
feel like when you look at the body from like a natural holistic standpoint, there are ways that we can implement healing that work across the board. And so that's what I'm actually working towards, which is it's a major uphill battle, learning like what works for most or even everybody, like what's gonna always works. So it keeps me constantly learning.
Absolutely. And I think, honestly, we have to keep learning till our dying breath, just constantly working at it. It is a lifelong journey, just like, well, health in general. Just think about health in general. It's a lifelong journey. You have to constantly work at it.
Okay. So autophagy. Do you want to maybe break that down for us a little bit? I know a lot of people in my community are familiar with the term, but how would you describe autophagy?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So autophagy is something that's really come into its own over the last 5 or 10 years. I think a Nobel Prize was actually won over that particular concept, if I'm not mistaken. Autophagy is essentially, if you think of, well, let's break it down from the full body first. So you've got your body, and your body is made up of organs. So think of like your heart, you think of your liver, you think of your kidneys, things of that nature. And what makes up those organs is individual cells that are packed together.
Mm-hmm.
And they have particular characteristics that make them that particular organ. Now, those individual cells have a process within them that's called autophagy. And essentially what it is a cleanup process. So think of like a janitor at a school, or just a janitor in general, that's going to go through this cleaning process of making sure that everything is orderly, making things organized, and making sure that things are functioning the way that they're supposed to be functioning. That is essentially autophagy. So if you have not always, but usually, if a cell has high autophagy, then that means that it's essentially going through broken proteins, broken pieces of fat, and things of that nature that can kind of crowd the actual inside of the cell and start to clear it out, try to recycle it. And that's actually another really cool aspect of autophagy is your cells are incredibly intelligent. They don't just destroy broken parts and make them smaller and then get rid of them. It actually recycles them. So it's able to reintroduce those exact same components and start to build more functional units within the cell.
That's huge because essentially what you're talking about is a mechanism that works. It's like 100%. It doesn't, there's no waste. It turns the waste into, and I know that when I was younger, when I was in school, they told us that no machine is 100% efficient. Even being an electrician, no system's 100% efficient. There's always some sort of waste, whether it's heat or whatever it is. But if you can harness that waste, recycle it, and then turn it back into energy, then you've got a closed system that it works. It just works.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that's essentially what the cells are when they're functioning properly. But what's I guess so we're learning about promoting autophagy, but
Mm-hmm.
are there things that can kind of hinder this process from happening naturally? Like,
Absolutely. Uh, one prime example that I'm sure everybody's familiar with is cancer. Cancer is a disease in which autophagy, some of the genetic underpinnings that would promote autophagy within our cells are disrupted, so that you see much lower levels of autophagy occurring. Also, just other diseases in general, just anytime you're going to have a situation in which your cells are supposed to be functioning normally, then there are situations in which those diseases can completely stop, maybe not completely stop, but certainly dramatically lower the cell's ability to function. And in those situations, you have your immune system that comes in and it has to get rid of those particular cells because they're not functioning the way that they should be functioning. Now, what's really interesting, though, and I know something that you talk about a lot, is fasting. Fasting dramatically increases autophagy within our cells, and it actually ramps up that that clearing out process.
Gotcha. So essentially, if we're the disease in general tends to slow this cleansing process, even sometimes, I guess, stop it to the point where those cells need to be discarded. But fasting helps to promote the healing, the cleansing process. And essentially that's all we're really talking about, is allowing the body to do what it's naturally designed to do.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah, you're essentially implementing a stress that is actually should be a common stress for us. Uh, and it depends on the fasting protocol that you use. Some of the more extreme ones, if it's several days, you're going to see added benefits from that. So yeah, but fasting in general, I think the numbers are something around, like, you start to really see some serious benefit from around 14 to 16 hours of fasting, kind of that initial start. And that's what a lot of people usually start with, something like that, like a lean gains approach, which is the 16-hour fast and the 8-hour consumption period. And then, of course, you can kind of bump that up from there. But even from the very beginning of that, you're starting to see autophagy markers start to increase over time.
Okay. So then let's talk about this paper. You
Mm-hmm.
do you want to maybe kind of outline this paper you've been researching for us, so we have an idea of what what
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. So there's this paper that's made its rounds. Actually, it's by a group, research group that does a lot of research on fasting and also what's called fasting mimicking diet. I don't know if you're familiar with that or if you've ever heard of it before, but the fasting mimicking diet is supposed to, just like the name implies, it's called fasting mimicking, so it's supposed to mimic fasting. And essentially what it is trying to use nutrition to figure out a way to mimic essentially water fasting. So not eating anything and just drinking water. This fasting mimicking diet is a situation in which you can consume a little bit of nutrition and still see largely the same benefits as fasting. So, but we can essentially use the terms interchangeably. So if we say fasting or fasting mimicking, I'm just going to go with fasting just because that's what we're typically focused on. So all the benefits that I'm going to be talking about in this paper that they investigated, and it is a monster of a paper, there's tons and tons of information in it. It really dives into some of the unspoken aspects of fasting that across YouTube, they just don't talk about this stuff nearly as much as they do about like weight loss and things of that nature, which absolutely is a component, a benefit of fasting. So what they did is they had 3 different models, and I think we should probably focus on just the 2. One is in humans, so they had clinical trials with humans, so they do have some data on humans specifically, which is fantastic because that is directly relatable to, well, us and the audience. And secondly, they had mouse models. And those mouse models, they're able to see some more exact findings. So what's happening within the cells? They're able to figure that out with the mouse models. So they looked at a bunch of different areas, but the fasting itself, they did a 4 to 5 day fast. So this was a water fast or fasting mimicking diet for 4 to 5 days, and that was only once a month. So for 4 to 5 days of that month, and then for the rest of the month, they ate completely normally, no restrictions whatsoever, but they still saw benefits from that 4 to 5 day window, still showed benefits long after the fasting period had finished. And among those benefits, I mean, we can run down the laundry list of different things that it positively impacts, but that's kind of the general rundown on how the paper was designed.
It's interesting because I've spoke on this a few times. It's like literally this is how powerful the fasting is. As soon as you stop eating, right, you just stop putting stuff in your mouth, your body instantly begins this process of healing. And you don't have to do a ton of fasting to see results. I tell people all the time. And so to kind of confirm, what the paper is saying,
Mhm.
you could fast one day out of the week and you will see benefits from it you just don't eat today. Or for me, what's I think even more beneficial is doing some sort of daily fasting. Most people would refer to it as like an intermittent fasting. And what I usually suggest is literally just skip breakfast. If you skip breakfast, you're prolonging your fast from the time that you stopped eating the day before, and then all the time that you've been asleep, whatever it is, 6-8 hours, and then maybe into the early afternoon or the late morning. You've just created this amazing 12, 14-hour fasting window or whatever it is. And if you just do that, just by skipping breakfast, you will see so much benefit from it. So I'm curious with the benefits that they saw on while they were testing the mice.
Right.
Where did any of them have disease? Like, what are some of the things they were looking for? Were they looking for weight loss? Were they looking for, they had tumors shrinking? What are some of the things they saw?
Okay, Chris, here we go. So, specifically in mice, they had a lot of different changes. I'm just going to walk through the majority of them, but not all of them. So, with fasting, and this is going to be something that you've spoken on, a lot of other people have spoken on, they saw body composition changes, meaning that you essentially maintain lean mass, as in muscle mass, which is something you want because it burns a lot of energy, which is fantastic, and it lowers fat mass. So they saw betterment in body composition in all of these mice, but more specifically, it was targeted in terms of where they lost fat. They lost a lot of fat in what's called visceral fat, which is the fat around your organs, which is usually considered the more detrimental type of fat, just because of its location, just because it's so close to the organs. So it seems to have a specific impact on that type of fat. Now, beyond that, however, it also had an impact on organ size. So, like the liver and the kidneys and things of that nature actually shrank.
Wow.
But what's really interesting is that once the mice were able to eat up to their normal amount, so they fasted for those 4 to 5 days, and then once they were reintroduced to food, their organ size actually matched. And these are old mice, so relatively old. We're talking like comparable to humans, I would say something like 60, 65 years old. So not like really, really old, but a little bit more elderly. Their organs actually increased up to the size of young mice. So not comparable to the same age mice, but actually younger. So it had kind of a it's going to be tough for me to say, rejuvenative impact. I don't even know how to say that word.
I don't either.
But you understand what I'm saying.
I got you. I'm with
you. So it really improved the well, in science we call it morphology. So kind of the look and the feel of those organs went back to more of a youthful demeanor. And actually, before we started recording this, you were telling me about what happened with your brother. That kind of stuff, just going back to that youthful demeanor. So on top of that, in terms of bone mineral density, so the compactness of our bones, we want our bones to be extremely compact. And that actually that was preserved more readily in the fasting mice compared to the non-fasting mice. So the preservation of the actual insides of our bones would, if this were to translate to humans, would be better preserved than it would be in non-fasting conditions. And then liver regeneration. So going back to the organ regeneration, or kind of increasing back up to its normal size, the organ regeneration upon the introduction of food, within 1 day, there was a massive spike in terms of how the organ was able to regenerate itself. So it shrank, and then within a day of consumption, it started to blow back up to its normal size, but again, relative to youthful mice,
Right.
so not to similar aged mice. In terms of cancer, that's another one. So they compared old mice or elderly mice, and they had a fasting condition. Again, just doing those 4 to 5 days and then having periods of time where they could eat anything and everything they wanted. So that the only change was just fasting for a few days, just like you mentioned earlier, compared to mice that did not fast at all and they were able to eat whenever they wanted to. And then they had a comparison to really young mice. So again, with that situation, with fasting, they saw decreases in tumors. So the numbers of tumors on the mice,
Mm.
they saw decreases of when the tumors presented. So they presented much later in life. So the very first tumor would present much later in life. And the size of the tumors were much smaller. Not only that, the deaths from cancer were substantially decreased from fasting by fasting itself. So really remarkable changes in that regard. Also, other things to just quick mention. I mentioned this earlier that greater autophagy was increased, and this is actual cellular change. So they actually measured within the cells. So
Right.
this is like they're just kind of they're not just thinking about it and saying, oh, well, this might happen. They're actually measuring it within the cells.
Mm.
So they saw markers of increased autophagy. They also saw that I've got my notes right here. That's why I'm looking over to the side.
No problem.
But they saw increases in what's called white blood cell count. So if you think of your white blood cells as part of your immune system, because that's essentially what they are, in your bloodstream, you have nutrients moving through your bloodstream. You have oxygen moving through your bloodstream. And that's what's allowing you to just stay alive. But even within that, in your bloodstream, you have red blood cells. And these red blood cells carry oxygen and they remove carbon dioxide. And that's why we breathe. So we breathe in oxygen and then we release carbon dioxide into the world. And that allows us to live. But not only did they see increases in red blood cells with fasting, they also saw greater quality of those red blood cells. And then white blood cells, which are part of our immune system, are also found in our bloodstream. And they kind of circulate around, they kind of scavenge around, and they try and figure out which cells are healthy and which ones are unhealthy. And they will actually pick out different cancerous cells that might start showing themselves and get rid of those. And it also get rid of the cells that we were talking about earlier, the ones that are having difficulty with their autophagy machinery and are starting to present with problems. They'll pick those out and destroy them, essentially just eliminate them. So white blood cell count was actually increased back up to normal young mouse levels. So not, again, not to the comparable aged mice, but to the younger mice. So a ton of different things as well. Stem cells is another area where they saw changes. So, and I'll leave it here. You know, even though I've got more, you know, there's effects on the brain and all kinds of stuff. But the last one is stem cells increase in what's called mesenchymal stem cells. So I know that probably means nothing. It's like it's a whole nother world. But mesenchymal stem cells are what differentiates a stem cell from any other cell in our body, like our skin cells. For example, if you just look at your hand, your hand is made up of millions and millions of cells, but they are what's called differentiated. Essentially, they've chosen their job. Their job is I am a skin cell.
Mm.
A mesenchymal stem cell has not chosen its job. So it can turn into a muscle cell. It can turn into a fat cell. It can turn into a neuron in our brain. It can turn into a variety of different cells. And they saw increases in these mesenchymal stem cells in the fasting mice.
That's huge.
Yeah.
That is huge because, you know, I know that they're doing this research where they're they're pulling stem cells from fetuses, baby fetuses, and they're pulling stem cells from animals and things. But essentially what you're saying is this paper is showing that, at least with the mice trials, they were able to manufacture these stem cells themselves. And I mean, that's huge, because if you have damage anywhere in the body, then the body can manufacture these cells that can go and replace the damaged tissue and things like that.
Absolutely.
So, I mean, that's just, it's phenomenal. And as you mentioned several times, with the organs reverting back to a youthful status.
Mm-hmm.
So earlier when we were talking, I was telling you about how my brother, when he started this process at the age of maybe 28,
Right.
He looked older than me. He actually looked older. People would often think he was my older brother. And, we're about 4 years apart. So he started fasting, healing, losing weight, getting healthier, exercising, eating better, all of the things that I talk about.
Mm-hmm.
One day, maybe about a year and a half after he started this journey, he decided, I'm cutting my beard off. I don't know. I thought it was a terrible idea. He looked weird, but we noticed how youthful he looked. I'm glad he did it, because it was like, whoa, John, like, you've lost age. It's like, like, we've got this term that we're like, you've lost age. And what we tend to find is, if you're fairly young, we're talking between the ages of 30 and 40, you usually lose about 10 years of age off of your life when you adopt this a regular fasting routine and proper dietary strategy. And then the older you are, you can actually lose more age. I mean, obviously, we're really just going off of how the youthful people appear, but now you're bringing another element into it. I'm talking about how even the older mice were able to have more youthful organs. So I think that it's amazing, because everything that we're seeing, just from our observations and of humans. Now you're telling me that with the mice trials, they're having the same they're having the same observations. So I'm really confident that we've got something solid here.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, some of those things were also confirmed in humans. So it's not like we even have to, speculate on it. We know that some of these things are absolutely true.
So the human trials, were they similar to the trials with the mice, where they would do 4 to 5 days of fasting and then eat regular the rest of the month, or kind of how did that go?
That's exactly how they did it. So they wanted to have a lot of similarity between the two different trials. And for humans, yes, again, so they did 5 days of fasting, and they keep in mind this is the fasting mimicking diet, but that's an easier version of the water fast. The water fast is for sure the harder version,
Right.
but so they just fasted for 4 to 5 days, and then they literally just ate whatever they wanted, went straight back to their old diet for the remaining 25 or 26 days of the month. So imagine if, and you mentioned this earlier, that if you just make this one change, that can have a dramatic impact on your health overall. And then if you incrementally started to improve other areas, like, throughout those 25, 26 days, sure enough, like eventually you're going to end up in a situation where you are so much better off than what you were before.
Yeah, I mean, I think now I've done a couple of experiments myself with my friends and my family, people that I could monitor close. Right, I had a friend who had horrible migraines, to the point where she couldn't go out in the sunlight. It would make her feel ill.
Wow.
Just bedridden, terrible. And we didn't do any fasting. She's like she's kind of like a gym rat. And all gym rats, they're all afraid of losing body like size and whatever. So I was like, well, let's just let's just do this. Take away all of the garbage that you're drinking. Don't
Mhm.
drink the coffee and the energy shots and, like, all the stuff. Just drink water and do water. Increase your water intake for the next 30 days. And let's see how that goes. After after 2 days, her migraines had subsided to a point where they were pretty much, she didn't even notice them. After 6 days, they were completely gone. After, I think, a week or two, it might have been 10 days, a week or 10 days, she noticed that her skin um, was becoming more vibrant. And one of the things she noticed instantly, which she was very surprised about, was she had more energy, because she previously she was taking the energy shots and drinking a lot of coffee for energy in the morning, because she's just like a workaholic. And I was just like, you got to stop that. So she just knew she was going to be dragging all day long, but she saw increase in energy. So I could imagine if you combined just drinking more water, cut out all the other stuff, just drink more water, and implement a daily light fasting schedule, whether it's fasting mimicking, skipping breakfast, or whatever. Those two things combined, I'm sure within just 30 days, you would see such a huge difference in your health.
Absolutely. Yeah. Some of the changes that they saw were literally the next day. Simple as that.
So the reality of this is it doesn't take long. You don't have to do a lot of things. Um, Now I'm kind of familiar with the fasting mimicking, and as you mentioned, it is much easier than water fasting. In my experience, I have found it more beneficial to do the pure water fasting, which is why I focus on the pure water fasting. But I
Mhm.
think that as a method to really just give people an opportunity, like a transitional period, that fasting mimicking diet might be great for a transition if you want to move into water fasting or some type of fasting regimen, um, and you're getting similar benefits.
Yeah, absolutely. It would definitely be a recommendation if somebody has trouble with water fasting, they could easily do this for, a few weeks, see how they feel, and then go from there.
So you said you're taking a class. You guys are talking about autophagy, and I'm curious, is this something that you personally have gone off and researched on your own? Was this an assignment? What does the rest of the class feel about fasting? Like, what do the teachers feel about fasting and things like that?
So this is actually not for a class necessarily. I just decided for my YouTube channel, I just decided to uh, jump into this. But I did find out about it actually through a class. So one of my professors was talking about the fasting mimicking diet and the impact of fasting and things of that nature, and that kind of turned me onto the subject. But he had just thrown up in class just like this one graph of all these different things that could potentially happen with fasting. I was like, well, I'm intrigued. I was a little skeptical,
Yeah,
as a good scientist should be.
yeah.
And I was like, okay, fair enough. Let me check it out. So then I decided to go through this paper, and I literally spent like a month reading this paper and creating content around this paper. And I mean, I don't argue the data. So the bottom line was that the data was just incredibly beneficial towards fasting.
That's wonderful, man. I feel like oftentimes scientists, they get caught up in dogma, and it's just like, what does the data say? What do your like what is right here in front of our face? What are we seeing? And it's just like, if we just look at the data, then forget what you think and the theories and just look at the data. I love that. I love that about you. Um, so I'm curious now. Do you plan on doing any fasting yourself?
Oh, who said I'm not doing fasting? I am. I'm fasting right now.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, I've been doing, and I did this before as well. Just because there were other, like, outside of the biology of it, there was just some psychological benefit to it. Just constricting your eating window to 6 hours or 8 hours or whatever, especially when you're trying to lean down. There's just some obvious benefit there. So I did that several years ago and to great effect. And I decided, well, why not do it again? So I fast for between 16 and 20 hours. But I will say that I think because of this paper, I am thinking about implementing, once a month or once every 2 months, doing like a water fast, essentially, where I just wouldn't consume anything and just kind of see how I feel after that.
Yeah, I mean that's in my opinion that's the best way to do it, is just experience it firsthand. I think that's one of the things that set me apart from a lot of the people, especially on like YouTube, who are talking about it. Not the fasting channels, because I think with the fasting channels, I think those guys definitely do practice what they preach. But with the prolonged fasting, where a lot of people are just reading papers and, citing other people's work, and they're not actually doing it for themselves. And it's such a different beast when you actually do it. You can experience such an array of things because, I tell people fasting is like a fingerprint. Every experience is unique. And so what I experience on my first fast versus my most recent fast are completely different.
Yeah.
And it just gives you, it gives you so much depth. So I'm glad that you do it for yourself. Some of the interesting things that I have found that literally no one else talks about, and once again, I think this is just simply because people aren't fasting for themselves, but I noticed that my dreams came back. So when I was a child, I would dream every night. And I remember at some point in time, I stopped like remembering my dreams, as they say.
Right.
I was asking my mom and people, and they're like, "Oh, you dream every night, you just don't remember it." And I'm just like, "That's weird," because I used to remember it. And so, probably about 3 years ago, my dreams started coming back, and now it's to the point where I dream every single night. So,
yeah, that's incredible.
right? It's and one of the doctors that I like is Dr. Bergman. He talks about the REM state of sleep and how that's the regenerative sleep, when you get in that REM state of sleep. And from my understanding, that directly correlates to like when you're dreaming. When you're dreaming, you're in that deep sleep. You're in that restorative sleep. And so I just think about how many people are out there getting restless sleep. You could sleep for 6, 8, even 10 hours and not feel restored because you're not getting, that restful sleep. So
absolutely.
Yeah. Quickly, I wanna give you the opportunity to tell my audience about your channel, because when I was researching fasting, I would actually watch channels like yours. Some people might consider it, not as entertaining, but I guess the nerd side of me is like, yo, I love the papers. I love hearing about the science. So I want to give people an opportunity to get some insight on what you do.
Yeah, sure. I appreciate it. So, during this whole evolution of me wanting to educate myself and really going through my formal education on the side, just because I was so obsessed with just learning more about how the human body works, I decided to branch off and start creating this website called Physionic, physionic.org. I think I've got it written up there, Physionic. And then I decided, well, okay, I'm going to start reading the literature for myself. And because I had access to it, I had this formal education, and through the university, you are allowed access to essentially every single paper that's ever been created.
Nice.
So I started reading studies, and then I wanted to distill that information into articles. So I started writing articles with my references for every single sentence that I would write. So then people could go back, and I could always just reference my articles, and I would say, okay, well, I've got 30 studies backing everything that I just said. And I personally read every single one of those studies. And then because I know a lot of people are visual learners, I decided to do the YouTube channel and link the two. So have a YouTube channel where I essentially break down the graphs and try and make it a little more easily understood for individuals. And always, and this is absolutely incredibly important for me, is if somebody disagrees with me, that is fantastic. That's exactly what I want. I want people to disagree with me and provide their own references so we can have a discussion about it, and so I can get to the bottom, the truth. That's what I want.
Yeah.
I don't care about like what I said earlier. I was skeptical about fasting. Then I read this paper, and now I'm less skeptical. It's just
Right.
you have to be fluid with how things change and how science progresses and things of that nature. And being stuck in your ways is not the way to go. So yeah, so Physionic is just learning about the human body, how nutrition impacts our body down to the cellular level. My motto is learn your body, and it's also from the macro to the micro. So from the macro, the entire body, down to the micro, the actual microscopic organisms or the cells themselves.
Absolutely, man. I am 100% with you. I actually my goal with all of this is just the truth. And people tend to assume sometimes that I just believe what I believe because whatever, and it's like I can't be moved. But I do welcome disagreement,
Mm-hmm.
as long as people are providing me with something of substance that I can actually look into. Because it's like a lot of times people just they don't, they're not doing this research themselves, or
No.
like they're just going off of what some they heard or what they think, and it's just like you know um I'm showing you all as best as I can, like real life, what is happening in reality when we fast, what is happening in reality when we increase our water. Forget the theory, what's happening. And then when you don't agree, show me, like, for example, one of the big things as it relates to fasting is, should you be taking some sort of supplement when you fast?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll just kind of leave that broad. Should we take a supplement when we fast? And so I promote pure water fasting. I really promote, like pure juice fasting, just the most pure forms of fasting without supplementation. I'm not completely against it, but people will tell me like, "Oh, you're gonna die because you didn't supplement," or you're gonna. But it's like, but I've done this for myself, and I'm right here. I'm still here. Like I don't teach anything that I've never done. So you would need to show me where someone did this fast or whatever and died. But yeah, that obviously that's taking it to the extreme. But I mean, that's
Right.
what people do. They're like, you're gonna die, you're gonna cause yourself permanent organ damage. And I'm just like, well, I'm okay, just show me. Like, that's all
Yeah.
I'm asking. Like, show me the where someone did it and they had this type of result. But
Yeah, it's it is funny. Like people love to say no, but then you ask them, okay, prove it. Show me some sort of evidence, but they can't. Absolutely. Actually, going to you've got several interviews with individuals who have greatly benefited from their diabetes. Like their diabetes got much better from fasting.
mhm.
They talk about that in the paper as well. Again, they showed. So on your channel, you're showing anecdotal evidence of each individual telling stories of how fasting helped, right? Well, the evidence is here in this paper that with this fasting protocol that they used, there was a decrease in blood sugar levels, and there's a significant decrease in blood sugar levels. So right there, you're getting anecdote and you're getting scientific data to essentially all point towards one direction. You can be pretty certain then that that is the reality, that is
Right.
the truth.
Yeah. Yeah, and then I mean that's the problem. We have these beliefs,
Mhm.
and it's like the evidence is right here in front of you, but you have a
Right.
belief, something that you've been taught for X amount of years, and it's just dug in so deep, and we got to learn to let go of our beliefs. So, uh,
Absolutely.
meeting someone like you who doesn't have that issue where it's, it's like you're just looking for the truth. That's very exciting for me, and it lets me know that there's still scientists out there who are really, they're not interested in just, I don't even know what it is people are after, money or fame or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like you're looking for the truth. You're really looking to learn.
Oh, absolutely. I will say that I'm biased in one way, that I do have a strong held belief, and that belief is flexibility. You
Yeah.
need to constantly be fluid with how you think about things.
Absolutely. Nick, this has been amazing. I really enjoyed this. I was excited when you reached out. It's actually my goal this year to collab with other YouTubers and things of that nature. So this was right on time.
Yeah, I'm glad. I deeply, deeply appreciate the opportunity to just talk about it. And hopefully people can get across that I get really excited talking about science. I just kind of geek out about all these different aspects. And yeah, so I really appreciate it. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. And if I'll be thinking about different ways where maybe we could do some collaborations in the future.
Sure.
I'd be interested in checking out your articles and things like that you've posted that, hey man, I could probably use, because
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm just looking to educate people. So
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, bring it on.
All right. So what's the name of your YouTube channel one more time? Do you have Instagram, or, how can people get in touch with you?
Yeah, so let's see. So YouTube is Physionic. It's Physionic. And on Instagram, it's Physionic_PhD. And then I have a podcast that releases 5 days a week where I teach a new nugget of information every single day. And you can literally type Physionic, just like it's spelled for YouTube, literally type it into Google, write podcast afterwards, and you will find it on Stitcher, Apple, everything,
Everywhere.
Spotify, it's all there. And yeah, those are kind of my main mediums that I typically use.
Okay. Awesome. All right, y'all. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit that like button. If you want to see more videos like this, don't forget to subscribe. Definitely go out, check out Nick's channel, Physionics. Subscribe there. I mean, I'm the type of person, I have a good sense for individuals, their energy, their intentions, and I could tell. I mean, like I said, I've looked at his channel as well. I could tell you that he's a solid dude. So go check him out. And as always, the application of knowledge is power. And I'll see you all next time. All right, Nick. Appreciate it, man.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. That was a ton of fun.